Coming off the legendary foundation of games like Wizardry and Ultima, JRPGs seemingly started to rise in prominence in the mid to late 1980s, with the likes of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy becoming mainstream household names, due to the excellence displayed by Squaresoft and Enix, among the many other titles around this time that will become the basic foundation for what's to come in the preceding decades. Atlus, Namco Bandai, Sega, Game Arts, Camelot Software, and many more prolific companies took center stage in what seemed like a gaming renaissance for a genre still relatively new, while innovating in scope each and every year so vast and quickly, while at the same time maintaining a standard of quality only present during this time. It only felt natural. See, if JRPGs were just getting started in the 1980s, they truly hit their mainstream stride in the 90s to early 2000s, the most potent transitional period of the genre, that saw various series and franchises go from just being D&D inspired or novel inspired game concepts and open up a path of true unconventional gameplay innovations and mannerisms of storytelling that only an interactive medium such as video games could. Final Fantasy games onward started to have more serious, in-depth stories and lore, creating the foundation and genre conventions the series is known for today. Chrono Trigger's unconventional time travel format, where your actions and choices greatly affected the trajectory of the story and how it would go and where it would end, was a true novelty at the time. Here you could even fight the final boss of the game at the very start if you wanted to. Grandiose unique battle system and being one of the best looking sprite RPGs of all time. Megami Tensei and all of its spin-offs, such as Majin Tensei Devil Summoner, with their approach to storytelling and gameplay, with a more darker, rigid atmosphere in comparison to its rivals, along with incorporating the monster collection style aspect that a lot of other games would later rip off. The negotiation mechanics with the demons, the press turn system, all staples of a growing franchise, natural evolution. Phantasy Star's sci-fi approach to storytelling that hadn't been in the genre until its conception, crafting a true masterpiece of a game with its fourth installment. The Shining series, one of the most legendary tactical JRPG franchises ever conceived, with Shining Force 2's sprite work and animation making even Pokemon, the highest grossing media franchise, look like a laughingstock in comparison, even by today's standards. Even franchises you'd think wouldn't do too well over in the West, such as Final Fantasy Adventure, which became the Mana series, hit its stride with its second installment, that being Secret of Mana, instilling long format cooperative RPG greatness. What a monumental feat achieved too, because prior, JRPGs tended to be single player experience only, and this game probably influenced other game franchises and started the sort of framework of couch co-op that became prevalent over the 6th and 7th gen gaming. Though the Mana series truly hit its stride with Seiken Densetsu 3, or better known as Trials of Mana, which made the somewhat janky bad hit detection combat of its predecessor far better, with superior graphics, a refined level up system that completely altered the appearance of the character. It was a true sequel. And then came Legend of Mana, combining the previous elements of the past games with a sort of sim-like terrain creator, where you gathered assets and expanded the land of the map, which changes the trajectory of the story, similar to Animal Crossing or Breath of Fire 2 before it. The Tales of series adding fighting game level movesets with RPG mechanics on top of the 2-player co-op. Legend of Dragoon's unique battle system. Medabots, or Medarai as it's known in Japan, which nobody ever mentions, that took a similar albeit different approach to the collection style RPGs found in Dragon Quest V, SMT, and Pokemon. The GBC Medarai games also made the Pokemon ones look like complete garbage graphically by comparison. Chrono Cross, Xenogears, Legend of Dragoon, Front Mission, Breath of Fire, Valkyrie Profile, Suikoden, Landgresser, Dragon Force, Wild Arms, etc. The magnitude of existing game franchises that were evolving and new ones being born was in no way short of phenomenal. So many unique styles of gameplay, art design, music, themes, aesthetics, all under one specific genre. It was a glorious time to not only be alive, but a fan of such a prolific genre. It truly felt like JRPGs were at their most mainstream in popularity. The hype and appeal that even the most obscure series could end up garnering was nothing short of profound. Even if a particular game couldn't amass a large audience for one reason or another, the quality spoke for itself, like Shining Force 3 on the Saturn. When you look at the JRPG output and variety of today, the juxtaposition is all too clear. There basically is no output. When you take a look at the 7th gen consoles, that being PS3 and 360, the drawing creations from this genre is staggeringly bad. So bad in fact, we've never truly recovered. There are some fantastic games from this period, like Valkyria Chronicles, the Disgaea games, Blue Dragon, Resonance of Fate, and some Tales of games, but the damage had already been done because of the shifting in market towards more Hollywood-style blockbuster games, multiplayer online shooters, and cinematic movie games. The mainstream leverage that JRPGs once had seemingly shifted overnight, with only Final Fantasy maintaining that status, even though its most controversial game yet was being released. That's not to say those were the only reasons RPGs started to fade in not only output, but quality. Directors leaving companies, death of key important players, management issues, and all-around corporate synergy are definitely key factors in the destruction of a once prominent genre. Jump up a decade later to the 8th and 9th, and speaking from the future, even 10th gen, quote me on that, the draw is only amplified more. When you think of the best JRPGs of the last decade, excluding remasters, what comes to mind? Probably Persona 5, FF7 Remake, Yakuza, Nier Automata, Final Fantasy 15, Xenoblade 2, Valkyria Chronicles 4, SMT4, rehashed Pokemon games, the Fire Emblem games. That's really about it, if you don't want to talk about handheld games and a few more budgeted, lesser known titles. And half of those games weren't even particularly good. I mean, Square really dropped the ball in FF15. The game shouldn't have even been made, but how many times it was delayed and how it was originally going to be a completely different game. Keep in mind, these are the games that are considered the most prolific of the last 2 generations or so. A stark output contrast from the 4th and 5th and 6th gen consoles, when all we have now in terms of variety are a few sequels, budgeted sequels, copy and pasted franchises. I mean, the damn contrast is night and fucking day. There's a clear void, one which has greatly dwindled the presence of JRPGs from feeling like big budget AAA experiences like many used to be, especially up till the 6th gen consoles, to just side titles that a niche subgroup of people may enjoy or really hate, while everyone else waits until the next Hollywood blockbuster game inevitably comes. JRPGs used to be some of the most graphically stunning games of their respective eras, from Grandia to Saga Frontiers and Legend of Mana, the Final Fantasy's constant showcase of groundbreaking CGI. The genre was really the first to nail the expressive character model as well, something I don't really hear talked about enough. This draw in quality and overall publicity of a once legendary genre has become so evident to the point even legacy titles with once great momentum have started to stagger, from Final Fantasy 15 to the divisive Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to SMT5, which I found very mediocre. Damn game was the whole reason I even bought a Switch. Square Enix recently forced Tri-Ace at gunpoint to release 2 sequels to their beloved franchises, Valkyrie Elysium. It's a fucking low budget title that feels like it came out on the PS3 in 2022. Then there's Star Ocean: The Divine Force, which I've yet to play but seems to have gotten mixed reception. Compare that to the original 2 Valkyrie profile games and the original 3 Star Ocean games, genre defining entries that more than hold up today, especially over those lackluster entries. When a sequel or a new installment came out, it used to be something to celebrate, but because of the output of once legendary companies, or rather lack of, it dismantles any excitement. At least Dragon Quest never dwindled in quality, with 11 being a true innovation to the classic series that seemingly advances every decade, from 5's unique story structure of playing as a child to an adult throughout the story, Dragon Quest 7 and 8 refinement of the formula, 2 of the most solid games ever made back to back. If only Square handled Final Fantasy with this much care and attention instead of making a movie back in 01 that probably bankrupted them in the first place. This stagnation also bleeds heavily into the design of these games. Most of these games used to be turn-based, but in a desperate attempt to reach a mainstream audience, almost all of these newer titles of once turn-based franchises have become action-based games, making a lot of them kinda blend into each other and feel the same, especially when it comes to Square Enix. Can't say it completely worked out for them. Compare how JRPGs were a couple decades ago. There was the traditional turn-based stuff like Dragon Quest, the action-based RPGs like the Mana series or Star Ocean, the turn-based stuff with monster taming, the survival horror turn-based RPG, aka Parasite Eve, the whatever the hell board game style gameplay that was going on in Unlimited Saga, the dating sim tactical RPG Sakura Wars, the life and pet raising RPG Monster Rancher, the grid-based platform RPG Mega Man Battle Network, fucking soccer RPG. Everybody and every company wanted a piece of that RPG gold, breaching new barriers and communities in perfect harmony. There were so many JRPGs back in the day, yet almost all of them were unique in their own right. Even the most hated games of that era, like Unlimited Saga, was still a pretty unconventional game by any metric. The main reason this lack of variety perceived as now is simply as I stated before, the overall shift in what the masses now enjoy is delegated towards looter shooters, cinematic games, action games with random tactical and RPG elements, despite said games not being RPGs in the slightest, like God of War. Hell, even Sonic is getting in on that action. Plenty of company dismantlements, or the big dogs not being as active as they once were. Companies that used to bring up the best of the best in the genre like Square, Capcom, Bandai, and Sega focus on franchises that appeal to a wider demographic that isn't RPGs, at least not anymore. Well, I guess Monster Hunter is technically an RPG. Companies like Sony, Level 5, and Game Arts of Grandia and Lunar fame haven't released new installments to their classic series in decades, and it's all because of the fact they're most likely not seen as profitable. So no new Legend of Dragoon, Wild Arms, or Dark Cloud, unfortunately. But I still can't hope to think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Companies like Square, Capcom, even a company as scummy as Konami, have recently made remasters of their classic games to definitely test the waters and see if there's still a large market for JRPGs like there once was. I mentioned in a previous video of mine that this is one of the best ways to actually support a decaying franchise and tell these companies there's still a market for this style of game, all by supporting these type of releases. On top of numerous remasters being released, there's games like Eiyuden Chronicle being released, a spiritual successor to the classic Suikoden games made by the original writer and same team. Same with Wild Arms with a game called Arm Fantasia. Yeah, couldn't have been more on the nose with that. I know spiritual successors from classic creators can be iffy, but there have been successes like the original Castlevania creator creating Bloodstained, an actual great successor to the later Castlevania games, since Konami refuses to pick up the slack of that series outside of a new collection. Even though JRPGs aren't as mainstream and innovative as they once were, there is most certainly and most clearly still a market for this genre. Who knows, maybe we're heading into another gaming renaissance. Plenty of other game genres that were arguably at their best during the 4th and 6th gen have seemingly started to make a comeback out of nowhere, from export games like the new Tony Hawk remaster, a new skate game, to arena shooters with the likes of the new Doom games and Quake Champions, even survival horror. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what unfolds in the coming future.